So I know a lot of you guys have been asking for like the gold knight class tier list, but then I looked at how many gold sabers there were, and I was like, you know what? We're just probably gonna take this class by class because for the silver rarity, there was actually not that many servants per like the knight classes and then the cavalry classes, and I felt like it was fine to kind of just lump them all in for one video. But dude, look how many sabers there are, and if there's gonna be like this many for archers, lancers, riders, casters, assassins, zerks, and extra, then we're definitely just going to have to do it class by class, which I don't think people are going to mind because you guys really seem to like these tier lists. So on that note, your boy's on the road to 100K, and you really appreciate a like and subscribe on the video. Help your boy out on that road to 100K. Also, you can click that join button if you're interested in maybe getting some extra bonus content in the future. Again, still thinking about doing like challenge quest videos for channel members, and then when we get enough members, kind of polling them and being like, hey, do you guys want to see like, I don't know, like a video on Vlad for members only, or maybe they'll get some content early. Just stuff along those lines is what I'm thinking for channel members. So if that tickles your pickle, then, go ahead and click that join button. But with that being said, gold saber tier list. All right, so this one actually I think should be pretty easy. I'm like, most of the servants here are like pretty straightforward. If we just start getting into it, like Artoria, I think you could pretty easily justify that she's in very good. Especially after all of her buffs, she's like one of the harder hitting servants in the game as like an AoE buster servant. She hits really hard. They gave her the big Ooga Booga skill where she can turn all of her cards to buster cards for a turn, which I know is kind of controversial because some people like it, like myself, because I like that you can like guarantee a buster brave chain. I really like that for just like very high DPS turns, but there are people that don't like it because they're like, well, what if I want to pop the skill and I don't want to turn all my cards to buster cards? Like I wanted to do like a buster arch chain, but I think it's actually fine because Artoria has enough NP refund from her own NP and then her third skill that I think it just kind of evens out that it's somewhat fine. And I think she's very, very solid. Like once you start kind of getting into Artoria and you start using her more and more, I think you see that she's actually a really, really just solid AoE saber. Nothing super broken, right? A lot of like why she's really good comes from that she just has really high natural damage, but again, I think the way she's built is pretty good. On the contrary, I think Saber Alter needs like one more buff to put her on the same level as her normal counterpart. I think she's kind of lacking that one last buff, and I think once they do give that to her, I think she actually will be on the same level. If I recall correctly, they also kind of slided her a little bit and only gave her a 20% battery when Artoria has a 30% battery, which is a little odd. I don't know why they did that, but if they just give her, I don't know, like maybe the same thing that Artoria has where she could turn all of her cards to buster cards for a turn, or maybe they give her that and then, I don't know, or they don't and then they give her like a mad NP gain skill or something, because, Saber Alter would kind of make sense. She's supposed to be, like an agent of the Grail, and the Grail gives you like infinite mana, so give her like another battery or some high NP gain. Like, let's kind of make that work. I think if we do something like that, we could definitely bump her up under there. But right now, I think she's very just like an average solid servant. If you don't have Artoria, she's a good replacement. Nero, I'm also going to put in kind of that average solid tier. I think she's a little wonky in the way that she's an art servant and you can't get her arts buff unless you're on like a waterside battlefield, like unless you're in specific places. I think that's a little odd, but she kind of makes up for Imperial Privilege. But if you're someone that doesn't have a way to give her that buff success rate, then Imperial Privilege is kind of like a coin flip as to whether or not Nero is going to be hitting hard or she's going to be hitting like a potato. So I kind of just put her in average for that reason. She's definitely fun to use, but it's more like it's less consistent, right? And that's kind of why I'm bumping her down from very good to more like the average, like solid tier. And yeah, I don't know, like I still think you get some solid use out of her. I don't think she's quite on the level of like you really need, like she leaves room for improvement. I think she kind of gets the job done that she sets out to do, but definitely probably gonna have more better options to go for. And you do need to kind of buff her up a little bit, like in fight on specific battlefields, but she still does have like the battery and everything, and I think that still does have some value for especially as like an AoE servant. You can kind of use it for farming. Unfortunately, kind of hard to use her with Castoria because she only has like the one hit on the NP, which is a little unfortunate, but moving on to Siegfried. I'm going to put an average as well. People really do hate on the boy Siegfried, but he's actually really solid after all of his buffs. I know it took a lot of buffs, but he's kind of got that MHX syndrome, where after all of the buffs they've given him, he's actually pretty decent now. Like, you can get some mileage out of him. He has a very solid anti-dragon niche, You know, the fact that he gets like a buster buff on NP, the fact that he has 2 NP gain skills means that he kind of goes zoom zoom with his NP gain. Again, you do have to pop his NP once for that because one NP gain buff is on a skill and the other is on his actual NP itself. So, you know, once you pop his NP that first time, then you kind of start zooming with the NP. So I think after all that, it makes him pretty solid. He's got like a debuff cleanse as well. So, you know, he's kind of good in like longer fights where people might be trying to debuff him. I think he's just come around to being a very solid servant, and people have this stigma for him because they're like, I don't think Siegfried's all that good. It's like, well, you use him after all of his buffs are done. And, you know, partly like take him to a fight where he has to fight like a dragon or something. And you kind of see how good he's supposed to be. The funny thing is that he's also going to have like very niche team comps when Roma comes out like earlier next year. Because like, the Roma, Siegfried, and Boudica setup when you're fighting dragons is absolutely dummy good, right? Like, you're hitting like a couple million damage without event bonus CEs or event damage bonus, right? Like, none of that, and Siegfried just goes absolute burr. It's a very specific team comp, but it is very fun to make him just go absolute hamtaro. Now, Ulterra, I'm actually going to put in leaves room for improvement, because you guys have heard me talk about this before, but like the dynamic between Ulterra and so like some of the other 5-star AoE sabers like Artoria, Arthur, Morgan, like not Morgan, but Mordred, and all of them, is that she was supposed to be the one that didn't have the battery, but she hit the hardest. And then like Artoria was like, well, she doesn't hit as hard as Ulterra, but she has a battery. Mordred doesn't hit as hard as them, but she has a special damage mod, and she also has like some kind of crit utility. Arthur has some, you know, special damage mod and crit utility. So it's like it's supposed to kind of balance out, but now it's just like Ulterra is kind of a wet potato in comparison to them. Like, she doesn't even hit as hard as Artoria anymore, which is really, really sad. Now her skills are also going to become a little outdated. So it's just like, give her either a skill that just massively gasses up her damage, or just give her a big, fat, juicy, thick battery, and just something to make her a little bit better. The unfortunate thing is I don't know when DW is going to touch Ulterra again, so I don't know when she's going to get this, you know, next buff, so I really couldn't say, but she definitely leaves room for improvement because her skills are kind of all just really basic and they don't hold up to a lot of the other AoE sabers. So moving on, we have Aeon. So Aeon is like the only one, spoiler alert, that's going to be in this tier because she's the only one that I really don't see a purpose in using. Like, yeah, she's got a taunt, and then she's got like a dodge, and she has debuff cleanse, and she lowers all enemies' attack and defense by like 10% on her NP, but like, what's the purpose? Like, I don't really see the purpose of using Aeon. Like, when you look at her stats and skills, you're like, this is a servant that looks like they can kind of just sit on the field for a while, but what's the point, right? Like, I don't, like, what's the purpose? Do you need like an extra George or Leonidas? But I feel like George and Leonidas are already really good as is. They're a low team cost, and I feel like they're better when it comes to supporting the team as well. You know, George with Bond CE can give you a hit of invincibility. Leonidas can give you a buster buff. You know, if you keep Leonidas around as well, he starts dropping stars. His NP is really solid. So it's just like, I don't see the point in bringing Aeon when you have like way better lower rarity versions. And then I just really don't see the point in bringing her to team comps in general. So putting her, like, she's going to be the only one down here because I'm like, it's nice, DW, that you wanted to kind of try something new with a Saber, but it didn't really work out. I think I'm also going to bump Nero down for leaves room for improvement because I actually do. When the more I look at like these two compared to Nero, I'm like, these two I think are more cohesively built than Nero, so I actually am going to bump her down. Okita, I'm going to put in very good. Like, I don't think I'm going to put her in top tier because I know who's going in top tier. I know who I'm going to put up there, and I don't think she's quite as good, but I may change my mind mid-video. You guys know that sometimes I change my mind in the middle of the recording, being like, actually, no, I kind of disagree. But Okita, everybody knows, very, very basic servant, but she's basic in a very good way, where it's like, you get a fat, quick buff. That's all she needs. You get a dodge to keep her alive, and she has a star, like, grab skill, right? Like, she's got all of the basic things she needs. She got an NP buff to make her hit a little bit harder. They gave her an attack buff to kind of make her hit, again, a little bit harder. But she's just, like, really solid. Like, high hits on her quick cards, like, decent NP gain, dropping stars all over the place so she can, like, crit on quick cards and her arts cards to, like, refund massive amounts of NP. Like, she's just a very general good single target quick servant, and probably the de facto single target quick servant, even after someone like Sabra Stalfo comes out. So yeah, pretty good servant. Mordred, I'm also going to put next to her pops over here because I think Mordred also is about as good as Artoria is. Even though Mordred doesn't hit quite as hard as Artoria, she does have the anti-Arthur niche, which isn't the most common thing, but it's not uncommon. You know what I'm saying? Like, It's not like you're never going to see it, but you will not see Saber faces like super often. But you might like see like one per event maybe. But then she's also packing the really good Buster crit skill, where she's getting like the Buster star weight and then Buster crit damage, which I think is the way to go for Mordred. I think it's a little unfortunate that like it's kind of sapping the stars away from like her arts card, so she can't do an arts crit. But I think in the way that they're like, we want to kind of make her more of a crit servant, I do like it, and I do like it as a Buster crit skill. So I think the edges that she has is that she has the edge when it comes to being a crit servant, and she has the edge when it comes to having an actual special damage mod where she actually does outdamage Artoria if she's fighting a Saber face. So I think she's very good on that. Nero Bride I'm going to put in top tier. Maybe a little controversial, maybe not, but I've been really praising Nero Bride for like the last couple of months, and that's because she literally is just a baby Castoria. Like, even if you don't think Nero Bride herself was all that good, she can substitute for a Castoria, and I think that kind of just speaks for itself as to how good she is. I don't know if I need to speak like too much for her, because I just talked about her yesterday in the support tier list. But then we have Shiki. Shiki's pretty average, solid. I know some people think that she'd be in here, but she actually is fine. She's acceptable to use. She's not like complete duty stinky. I do think she has like some areas that you could improve in, but I think like those are kind of like a Siegfried or Saber Alter type levels of improvement, where she's already got a solid base to work with. And then, you know, like if you improve her, she just kind of gets a little bit better after that. Like I think she's kind of packing everything she really needs at this point. Some people see the insta-kill mechanic as kind of like a negative for Shiki because they want to loop with her, but I think if you're bringing her to more difficult content, it's actually far more useful to like have her be a trash mob clear and like a second DPS. I think she works really well in that route. And part of the reason why people really don't like Saber Shiki very much is because they compare her to Assassin Shiki, who is built like pretty perfectly. But you got to understand that like when they released it too, they kind of made them mirrors of each other, and for whatever reason, they just made the free-to-play version like clearly 100,000,000% better. So it kind of made people have like this little sour taste for Saber Shiki, but she still actually is like not bad. She's still a very like average solid servant you could bring. Rama definitely leaves room for improvement. I have no idea what's going on with this dude. I mean, his NP gain, it looks like it's actually pretty decent, but then when you try to like gen NP with him, he doesn't do it at all. They gave him like a solid crit buff, but outside of that, like he's really just not doing anything. Is it like an anti-demon niche, which is also good, but like, dude, they need to like slap a fat battery on him, or just give him like, I don't know, like a skill that like the Karna and Arjuna skill, which I'm just gonna like dub as like the Indian Mana Burst skill, where it gives them the like 30% Buster buff and 20% NP damage buff, like that buff. They need to just slap that on Rama, right? Just give him that, or because of his lore where he's like supposed to be stronger than both of them, give him like a 40% Buster buff and then like a 30% NP gain buff, not NP gain, but NP damage buff. You can give him NP gain if you want, but I want him to get that NP damage buff to just make him hit like way harder. I want him to be like just doing far more damage than he's doing right now, because Rama just, again, leaves room for improvement. Sabre Lancelot, very solid servant. This is probably one of the easiest servants to use in the game. You literally just pop all three of his skills, pop the battery, get the stars, absorb the stars, and pop the third skill, get the crit damage, and start genning stars every single turn, and you just start chopping away. The good thing is that he does have an effect on his NP that does make him hit harder after every NP, because he doesn't lower the enemy defense, he lowers like their damage received or something, or lowers the threshold of them reducing damage. So he actually does do some pretty decent damage after like first, second, and then like third NP, which he can do pretty effectively if you're like getting good arts crits and stuff with him. You have decent support around him, but not very like hard to just be like, yeah, this is a very average dude. Like he's not like the best, you know, single target art servant. I think that would go to Saber Hokusai, who's not on the list, by the way, because I'm not doing free to play servants. But yeah, like not the best, but definitely like you can use him, right? He's like very like solid in that aspect. Same thing for Gawain. Gawain's not the best AoE. Like, actually, you know, I'm just gonna go ahead and put this up here. I'm gonna put Bargus in very good, because I literally think Bargus is just like power crept Gawain. I don't think Gawain is bad, but I just think that like Bargus is kind of doing everything Gawain is doing, but a little bit better, you know. I think Bargus is like a little like tankier, aside from just having like the one turn guts that like Gawain has. I think like, you start comparing them like in every like aspect. It's like, well, Gawain's got a charisma and he's kind of doing like some buster damage, but then Bargus over here is like getting stronger every single time she like does damage and like whatnot, and she's like absorbing HP from the enemy. Like Bargus is just crazy Gawain. She's like Gawain on steroids, which, I mean, look at her, she's huge. So I mean, understandable. But then like Gawain's just kind of like, I don't know, more in like the realm of like Saber Alter, I would say, kind of like the lesser AOE Buster servants. Whereas Barg is just absolute Hamtaro, like she's just crazy. Then we have Musashi. I'm gonna put Musashi in very good for now. I may slap her up in top tier though, because I do think Musashi's really good. She hits really hard. She has like the anti-foreigner, alter ego niche. She's just really good for boss fights because she has like the debuff cleanse. She has the invincibility. The pierce invincibility is always very good for challenge quests. And then she just, even outside of her buffs, just naturally hits really hard. Is one of the hardest hitting servants in the game. In fact, yeah, I'm actually going to slap her up here just because of how good I think she is for like just fighting hard content. Like I think the harder the content gets, the better Musashi gets. And I think having a servant that's this good in the thick of things is really, really solid to have. Then we have Arthur. I'm actually not the biggest fan of Arthur. I think Arthur's like, I'd probably just say like a little bit better Gawain, but not quite on this level. Because his crit skill, like, I think people really gas it up a little bit too much. It is a solid crit skill, 50% crit damage, and like the star weight for 3 turns. Or no, not even the star to just drop some stars or something like that. But I think that's fine. I don't think we should be gassing up being like, oh my god, he's like one of the best servants in the game. I give Mordred a little more credit because she has the 50% Buster crit damage specifically. So she's definitely tailored more to being a Buster crit servant. And I think I like her buff a little more, even though, you know, Arthur's super large thing, the more I think about it, like you do actually encounter like super large enemies and a lot of farming nodes. So I guess also with Buster looping being a thing, it might save Arthur a little bit the more I think about like him going up against super large, and that actually does allow him to do decent damage. I still think I like Mordred's Buster crit skill more than I like Arthur's crit skill, because again, I don't believe Arthur actually gets star weight with his skill. I think it's just like he drops stars and then it gives him crit damage. I don't actually think he gets the star weight, because if I'm remembering correctly, like that's the reason I was really shocked when he got his buff. But even if he does, you know, play devil's advocate, even if he does, I'm maybe just misremembering. Mordred getting the targeted Buster like star weight and the Buster crit damage, I value more because I think it's more of a targeted skill and it's more conducive to what she wants to do. So then we have Suzuka. Suzuka, I think I'm probably gonna have to put an average because, like, I really like Suzuka a lot. She's a servant that I've grailed on my NA version, but she leaves a little bit to be desired. Like, the way that they want you to play with Suzuka is they want you to, like, kind of have her skills function as, like, getting her star gen ready, being able to do crits, being able to, like, refund NP every turn. You have a little bit of a charm in there for a little bit of defense. And then her NP is supposed to drop a lot of stars for her to play around with, but I find that she really doesn't drop a whole lot of stars or enough stars for her to play around with and function well. You know, just kind of on her own. If you're, like, pairing her with Merlin, and who can give her, like, the extra star, the crit star gen, she actually just function a little bit better. But you don't want to waste Merlin's illusion skill just to have her drop some stars, which is kind of an unfortunate predicament you might find yourself in. So I think Suzuka needs like maybe one more buff. Like maybe if they give her like a hard survivability skill, or they give her a skill that maybe just drops 30 stars for her to play around with immediately, or maybe her NP drops like a guaranteed, just maybe just like a 10-15 stars. Like it's just like a low amount of stars that she needs to kind of make her a bit more consistent. But I do like her. I just think she's kind of more niche to play with, right? As opposed to some of the other AoE Sabers. Frank Saber, I think, is really good. I think Frank Saber, if you ever used her, I know not a lot of people probably have been able to use her because she's very limited. You know, she's a Summer 2 servant, and she doesn't come back a whole lot, but she literally is just like Refund City. Like, she has a really cracked NP gain skill. Her NP gain is like very, very decent. You know, like as long as you're just getting her arts and quick cards, you're just refunding 1,000,000,000% of your NP every single turn. She's actually really, really cracked in that aspect. Like, very basic like Okita. Ironically enough, both of these like single target quick sabers are really, really basic fundamentally, but they both are just really cracked in their ability to refund and just smash people with their NPs. Sitting Man is going to be going in average just because, like, so it's kind of like the dynamic way between these two. They're both like not super hard to use. It's just Lancelot's like a consistent 3-turn kind of like chop, chop, chop type of guy, whereas Munenori is like a 1-turn, wait a couple more turns, then chop again type of guy. Like, Munenori is very burst based, which I think is fine if you're okay playing with that, but it's not a style of gameplay that I particularly like, because I don't like my servants being kind of dead fish in the water for like a couple of turns. I kind of like them to be constantly doing things or prepping to doing things, whereas Munenori is kind of like you pop all your skills and then you wait like 3 to 4 turns before you can pop off again. I just find that to be a little annoying in use. Again, not a bad servant. Like, I think he does function pretty well in that aspect, and like he sets out to do, he does effectively. It's just not something that I think is very conducive to being like in the very good top tier area. But again, very average, solid servant. You can kind of like, still use him if you want. It's just not what I would, go for. Now, Sigurd, I was thinking about putting Sigurd in average and solid, but I think I'm going to put him in leaves room for improvement to send a message that we need to actually buff up Bully Sigurd, because Sigurd has the foundations, kind of like Ulterra, to be a very, very good servant, right? He's got like the massive crit damage on one skill. He's got big buster buff, and he's packing a guts. And then his third skill is a targetable like support skill, right? But we just need to buff him up in some areas. Like either skill 1, give him some star weight, give him like the ability to drop stars immediately. Skill 2, make that buster buff maybe 3 turns, something along those lines. Skill 3, when it maybe make it like it's a targetable star weight, or like it's a targetable battery on top of that. Just anything like that I think could help him out a lot. I think Sigurd would actually benefit a lot from like a 50% battery. I think that's something that would help him out a whole lot, because he already does do major ooga booga damage, right? He hits really, really hard, right? Like he's comparable to Musashi in how hard he hits. It's just everything else he does kind of flops. Like all of his skills are really outdated for a servant that came out around the 3rd year anniversary. It's very, very odd. So I think you just need some buffs, and once they start buffing him a little bit, he's going to be really, really good. But unfortunately, I don't know if I trust DW buffing Sigurd, because when they tried to buff him before, all they gave him was reducing an enemy's NP gauge by 1, and I'm like, dude, that's a utility skill, and Sigurd is clearly supposed to be like big ooga booga smackdown servant, right? And then you guys gave him a utility skill, so it's very odd in that aspect. I have no idea why they did that. Maeve, I think, is pretty solid. I don't think she's anything super special. I think she kind of has like lower percentages and kind of lower buffs on all of her skills, but I think she, like what she sets out to do, she kind of gets. I think she's fine, right? Because like all of her skills are a little meaty, like they've all got like decent effects on them, and that's kind of what saves her. But they're all on like pretty low percentages of like, it's like a 20% reduction of like an enemy's arts resistance, and then she's kind of reliant on the snapshot thing from her NP and how many defense lowerings you're gonna get. So kind of a fun servant to play as, but not like super game breaking top tier. Diermud, actually, Diermud I kind of just see as like the quick version of Sabre Lancelot. I know people are going to be like, oh my goodness, he's way better than Sabre Lancelot, but I'm like, I think they're like more comparable. They're almost kind of like the exact same thing, except Diermud's a little bit better because he's got like the evasion. He can actually keep himself alive, but other than that, it's like, I think they're pretty comparable. Like, I think Diermud is a little bit better in a lot of what, like, well, not in some ways, right, where like he's got like the NP gain and the quick buff. But I don't think it's good enough to put him in like very good, if you guys are catching what I'm saying, right? Like, I don't think he's like this good, like this much better, but I think he is a little bit better, right? I think he'd be very high in this tier. Landling I'm putting in very good. Landling, obviously, basically just like a cast skill character. We've talked about Landling a lot on this channel. He's very comparable in the cast skill, what he does. Very good for supporting like arts servants, right? Just does them very, very good. Gives them like buff success rate, gives them star gen, gives them an arts buff, crit buff, all the good stuff. All the things that every servant pretty much is going to want to need. Benny Enma, going to be another top tier servant. Literally, just take Sabre Lancelot and make her go on absolute steroids. She's got like the bad guy damage mod, so if you're just being an edgelord in front of Benny Enma, she's going to give you a bonk on the head. All of her skills are like really good. They're packed just to the bursting with effects, and they're all pretty decent. Like, you're giving like the entire party an attack buff, NP charge, you're sealing all enemies like NPs and everything like that. Just all these like very, very good effects. And then like the only bad thing, the quote-unquote demerit, is that you give the enemy team like 1,000 HP, but when the enemy party has like 100 million HP, I don't think that extra 1,000 really is going to make the world of a difference. So it's not really it's not even a demerit, right? It's barely even noticeable. Lakshmi Bai, we're going to be putting her in average solid. Kind of unfortunate that as an AoE quick servant, she absolutely struggles to loop her NP, which is kind of like when she came out, we were like, oh my goodness, new Jean face, AoE quick, she's going to be the AoE looping quick servant. And then she was like struggling to even get the job done. So Yeah, if you want to use her as like a support servant, because if you want to use her as like second DPS and support, I think she works really well in that. Just don't try to loop with her. I think you're giving like the crit damage and the attack buffs and everything to the entire party can make her pretty good as that secondary DPS, but she lost a lot of points in that. She can't even loop, which is kind of half the job of the quick servants. You're like, ooh, you're kind of losing out a lot there. Sabra Stalfo, I know this is probably gonna be a little bit of a controversial one, but I'm putting him in an average solid. There once was a time where I thought he was in like the very good tier, that I was having like a really fun time using him, but as more and more time goes on, he kind of starts to fall more and more, just because, yeah, I don't know, like, he can output some like decent turns. It's just, I think some of his skills get a little bit wonky in the way that they're implemented, right? Like, I don't think he was like the updated Okita that we all thought he was going to be. I'm just like, man, just give this boy a fat battery. I think it helps him out a lot. Maybe like slap another damage buff on there somewhere as well, or give him like a special damage mod, something else. Just like slap something else on him to kind of like make him a little bit better. Like he's kind of like missing something. It's kind of what I'm feeling. I think you could definitely argue he could be in very good. I don't think it's complete cap to say that he could be up here, but just from my performance and how I've used him, he just seems to be like a solid servant you can use, but like I would much rather use Okita, right? Just from my experience. Now, Dio Scurry. I praise these people a lot. Like, I think they're really, really good. They're literally a hybrid arts quick servant, and they are just absolutely stupid crack. Their first skill basically could just be the only skill they have at all. Like, it's giving them an attack buff, and then it's giving them what, like the opposite quick and arts buff. So like their quick cards now gen NP, and their arts cards now gen stars. So they just basically become an arts quick servant. Like, and they do the job like really well. They give like the entire party like an NP damage buff as well. They have like, they just have like all these just really, really like powerful skills built into them. They're lowering like the enemy's arts and quick resistance on NP. So it's just like, I could sing their praises all day, right? I think they're just really good in that aspect. And when they come out on NA in about a few months, I'm definitely going to be recommending people to summon for them, because they kick ass. Dude, they are so good. Unfortunately, then we have to go back to another kind of like more mid servant, and it's a servant I really like. Unfortunately, Tomoe over here is just kind of more on the mid side. It kind of makes me sad. I really wish she was a little bit better, but she's almost like Munanori, where she's like kind of built to be a burst servant. Like, you can farm with her, I guess that's cool, you know, thumbs up, you can do that, but she's kind of more burst based, and I don't know, it kind of hurts her potential a little bit. I kind of wish they didn't do that. She's got a few wonky skills as well, so she's gonna be getting slapped and solid. Saito, I've kind of gone back and forth as to whether or not I wanted to put him in very good or like solid, because I just think that like when you look at Saito's skills, he's really just a good servant. Like, he's kind of packing just everything you would want a good servant to have, like survivability, decent buffs, nothing too crazy, but decent buffs, like just all around. It's like, I don't know, I think the only thing, if I remember correctly, that he's missing is a battery, but it's just like, other than that, like, I think he's just, actually, when you look at him, you just get the depiction of, yeah, this is just a good servant. This guy is literally just solid. As opposed to the other servant that came around at that time, Mr. K-Pop Stan, I think he's very good, right? Because Saito kind of leans into like an arts buster niche, whereas they just put K-Pop dude over here into just full buster. They give him a really cool, unique skill that gives star weight to his arts cards, and then he also buffs his NP gain. I think that's also really sick that they did that. And then he's just capable of like doing like really good buster, like brave chain turns, where he's like buster critting and just slamming people with his NP. Very, very good for that aspect. He's going to be one of those servants that if you pull him when he comes around, because I think he comes around when Ibuki comes out, if I remember correctly. I think they're on the same banner. I may be misremembering, but I know he comes around with that Lost Belt 5.5. He's definitely going to be a servant that if you pull, he's definitely worth using. And then at the very end here, I mean, we just have the trifecta of good AoE servants. We literally have like the modern Buster AoE servant, modern AoE servant, and then we have modern Quick servant, right? Like, these three are just absolutely like stupid dummy good. I mean, Ibuki's got a 50% battery. She's slamming people with her damage. She can crit. She can bring party utility by like sealing enemy NPs and whatnot. Then she's slamming, like lowering buster resistance on her NP. She's just a very good servant all around. Muramasa, dude, I can make a separate tier for Muramasa for how good I think he is. Like, Muramasa is just the hard carry on my JP account right now. We went for NP2 on this guy, and I've never regretted it. I mean, you just use him to loop, like, Saber nodes, like, Rider nodes, Caster nodes, Assassin nodes, anything, really. Like, the dude is just, he is just an absolute maniac. His NP mechanic, where he's getting, like, an extra art and NP damage buff every single time he fires the NP, means that, like, he loops easier and easier and does more and more damage every single turn that he pops his NP, and it's just so dumb. Like, not even restricted to doing, like, 3 turns of getting his NP. I've had times where I've gotten his NP, like, 6 times in a row. Like, Muramasa is absolutely disgusting. And then, like, take that and then just make it quick, and then you have the Okita Saber, right? Like, just make Muramasa a quick servant, and there you go. Then you have Okita Saber. And I think Muramasa's a little bit better than Okita Saber, but same fundamental concept. Like, she's just the quick version of Muramasa, right? She's just the quick, crazy looping servant that everybody wanted Lakshmi Bai to be, but except for quick. But with that being said, everybody know, I just slurred over my words. Okay, everybody let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of the tier list. I'll try to remember to drop the link in the, like, pinned comment down below so you guys can make your own tier list. But with that being said, if you guys enjoyed this video, again, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Probably be doing the Archer tier list sometime soon, unless some whack news pops up on FGO. But yeah, other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace, late, guys.